Chris. Finally, we meet again for the monthly dragon. Hello, everybody.
Wow, we're back. Hello, people. Hello, people.
I'm so happy to see this position because you won't believe it. I've been
Yes, I
struggling
do
with it.
believe it before you say any more, Arne, because you may have forgotten, but this episode is precipitated by your very self because I received a garbled message not that long ago from you saying, Bishop, C4, Bishop C4, what's to be done, what's to be done? I thought you were talking about the Pope at first. I thought you were concerned about his well-being.
Yeah, he's
But
not so healthy at the moment.
no,
But
but eventually I figured what you really wanted to know is what should we do about this position here, which is essentially the 9 bishop c4, one of the main lines of the Sicilian dragon. What is black supposed to do?
I guess a lot of people at home feel the same way like I do, right?
If it makes you feel better, sure.
A little. Okay, so what do we do? Chris, please help us. Dragon Tamer, Dragon Master, you have to do your job now.
Okay, so first of all, I think you're absolutely panicking about nothing because let me just rewind. Let me just tell a little tale, right?
Okay.
And I'm going to head back to this position here, whereby we've got here the actual Sicilian dragon has just started. We've done g6, and white has selected bishop e3, suggesting but not committing at the moment to the concept of castling queenside, probably via a Yugoslav attack. Now, the first thing I'd like to point out is that there's incredible amount of options these days for dragon players, even leading up to the position that we've just discussed. Yep. For example, you know that the Hungarian dragon has been very popular. Yeah.
Oh, yes.
And this month, when I was doing my chess publishing dragon update, I came across a game which was a beautiful game, just very super quickly. Would like to show it to you, involving Daniel Dubov with the black pieces. Another super GM encounter, albeit
once again,
albeit in the World Blitz. He plays it a lot.
Yeah.
Just watch this game. I'm going to go over it quickly. And what I loved about this, I'm going to play it really quickly. It was played at a fast pace, so it's pure judgment. And if we watch this here, h5, of course, the Hungarian variation with a simple plan of swapping off the knights and whizzing the bishop out to h6. Here we had a trade of these bishops, and black prioritized the move bishop e6, primarily to grasp control of this diagonal here so that the white bishop doesn't get there. And does look at the bishop check, but now black moves the king to f8. Why bother castling when I'm going to be able to put my king on g7? Castles, white just plays pretty natural looking moves. Rook to c8. So white played h3 so they could go f4. I remember we had a question about that very topic many moons ago. Rook c8 now threatens to give up, well, not a sacrifice take here so we can win a piece. So the bishop goes back to d3, king g7. Black has done nothing special at all. f4 looks as though it might be trying to make get pawn to f5, some sort of kingside attack for white. Maybe, but it's not going to happen because the queens can come off. Boo hiss. But the point is, positionally now, black just stands very, very well. And look what happens here. Simple. Bishop to c4, take of bishops, rook on the 7th rank.
Oh, beautiful.
And black was already, it was on the way to victory. I mean, actually, just a couple more moves, binding down on this square, and then the knight comes out here, and then dominating the c file. No play for white on the f file, takes here. And it's just, oh my word, it was seriously, this was a painful game for white, which black converted in just a few moves. Absolutely wonderful stuff about goal. And I'm just going to quickly show it to you. It's game over. The people don't want to see this sort of thing.
No, it's beautiful.
I'm merely pointing out to you that even with the Hungarian variation, and then also instead of bishop to g7, natural move, black could even play a6 if they were intending to play, for example, the accelerated Dragodorf. The Dragodorf, of course, being the system where you play the Najdorfy moves on the queen side and the Dragony moves on the king side, hence the hybrid name. But another wonderful game showing the possibilities came up this month. You're going to love this as well.
Okay.
So after hit a6, white played f3. You just think surely b5 or bishop g7 or whatever. Black played e5, and at first you think, what's going on here? You wouldn't normally do that because this pawn here will be blocking a dragon bishop, but of course it hasn't committed itself to here yet. You're giving away an outpost and you're leaving yourself with a backward d pawn. But this game continued. It was so amusing. Bishop e6, and it's pretty clear now that black is simply trying to force through the move pawn to d5. And if you achieve that move, when things get swapped off the knight and you take on in d5 with a queen or a bishop, actually black's got a very nice pawn on e5 and has taken over white's operation. So white says, no, you're not having that. G4, because I want to play g5 to control that d5 square. And black says, no, you're too late, I'm afraid. What do you mean I'm too late? G5. I'm going to tell you this. Right, this is brilliant. So the idea is if black says, well, actually, I can advance my pawn to d4. No, you can't, because after knight takes, pawn takes, queen takes, you're still winning because there's a pin to the rook. But look at this for a lovely move. After g5, black just said, no, I'm just going to develop my pieces. Thanks very much. And white says, are you nuts, man? I'm having that. And black says, no, because I've delayed the fork here. And actually, in this game here, lovely little system. We're winning the piece back. Don't forget, there's a pawn over here hanging as well. So white chose to save the bishop wisely. But after takes here, takes rook c8, black was already better, slightly better in an endgame, courtesy of those isolated pawns on the queen side. So these new ideas, fresh ideas, keep coming up in the Dragon. We've got the Hungarian variation already. Now, you could say, yeah, Chris, thanks very much for all that. But can we just get back? You know, if we can get back to 9 bishop c4. I'm merely pointing out, do you know what? What's beautiful about the Hungarian Dragon and even the Dragunov is it's not like Dragon players are shifting from this system to that system. It's getting new recruits. Players that might have played the French or the Karjakin at e5 are playing these Hungarian variations because it's not like all the theory is relevant necessarily from the old mainline dragons. It's a different line almost in itself. So just saying there's plenty of options even until we get there. Now, let's talk about bishop c4. And see, slightly disappointing is that our very first, how long have we been doing this? Over 2 years now, I think.
There's been a couple of episodes.
Our show actually featured this particular variation.
It's been too long.
And we have done a few since then. The problem from a white perspective as to why does most white players tend to castle instead of playing bishop c4 is there's a lot of systems available to black. Now, I think I mentioned that to you, and you said something along the lines of, the engine doesn't like any of them, or something, some panicky remark like that. Now, funnily enough, what I find very amusing, you're not going to like this as well, because I'm sure ChessBase has some super duper wonderful versions, and we're looking at a slightly lesser one here. And I just something I would never normally do here. If I just switched on the engine now, I was just interested to see what it would say. And actually, it doesn't have black as any worse at all in this position, even though it doesn't even recommend the moves I want. It's got knight e5 0.00 or even 0.02. So what you're suggesting, of course, this is only Deep Fritz 14, which is well below your level of ability, I should imagine. But just pointing out, okay, the engines don't actually think that this position yet is in a bad state for white. And what options are there available? Well, of course, we know bishop d7 is the main line, but black, for example, has a system which is also popular, which is knight coming to d7, abandoning the king side, allowing knight b6, knight a5, going all in with the concept of occupying the c4 square with a knight, knowing that if we can secure to win a dark square bishop for a knight, we won't realistically get checkmated on the king side of the board. That's an important piece of knowledge that we try to take with us throughout the Dragon, that if your opponent doesn't have their dark square bishop, they can't swap off your Dragon bishop. So it's very unlikely they're going to be able to checkmate you, even if they get the queen down to h7.
That is an interesting move, yes.
So that's possible. It's kind of risky to abandon the king side. Bishop d7 is the main line. And after castle's queen side, there's, as I say, there's so many possible lines. So, for example, there's the Chinese system where the idea is to play b5 and knight c4. So rather than traditionally placing a rook on the c file, where it's useful, the idea is to go knight c4 and open up the b file, ultimately with a view to get down to attacking the b2 square. So this is the Chinese variation. there is instead queen a5 and rook fc8, which is how we started. I think it was called Chris Ward's nostalgic decision or something. I love the titles. I love these titles. Obviously, you're running short of them now, and you lose running out of
I'll
ideas.
just ask ChatGPT. Don't worry.
Of course, excellent. So queen a5. This is the system I used to play all throughout my junior dragon career. And when I first wrote the book Winning with the Dragon, this was the line which was subject to the main suggestion against 9 bishop c4. But also there's the Topalov system is very popular these days, of course, where black simply swaps off and then razzes those pawns, a5, a4. In a normal pawn race, of course, you would suggest that white's going to get there first because white will get to challenge this. It's not the pawns that are going to deliver the checkmate, but the open files behind them. But of course, the problem is if black allows a pawn here, this bishop can get hunted down. So white may have to, or white does have to advance one of those pawns at some stage. That's the Topalov system. That's very possible. And of course, the main line, rook c8, bishop b3, knight e5. And when white looks to play h4 to razz their pawn down here, black says, no, thou shall not pass. And this is the highly theoretical Soltis variation, which, as I'm aware, still stands the test of time, with white instead tending to be a bit trickier with the move king b1, saying, no, I'm not going to commit anything. Are you going to commit your knight to c4 yet? No, I'm not. And rook e8 is some amazing prophylaxis. You said, what on earth does that mean? Well, this is the idea is bishop h6 can now be met with bishop h8. And generally, even now, if white goes h4, h5, we're back into a Soltis line where rook e8 is kind of a useful move for lines where white goes knight d5. So that is the Soltis variation, right? I would like, though, to bring with you another option today.
Another option?
And I think I'll lose track of what I've actually covered here. I ought to sit down and go over them and remind myself of everything I've done before. But this system is also popular. Nakamura's played this before, so something different. And I have a short and sweet game to show you, which I saw it. I thought, I cannot ignore this game.
Roll.
This is just a lovely game. So we are now here. We are about to look at this game. So here, it wasn't knight d7. It wasn't bishop d7, but it was simple. And I think this is a system which is fine as well. Swapping off the knights in the middle of the board and playing the bishop to e6.
I played that, I think, yeah.
So you think you've played it? Well,
yes.
Let's see if... Okay, well, let's talk. So in this position here, what is quite amusing, what I love about this is I've also on my site, I've annotated a few super engine encounters, you know, these metal monsters that are 3,600 rated, not your average like Fritz 2 that I used to have when I was kind of like growing up, or not growing up, scratch that. When I was first a professional chess player, the engines we had available weren't quite of the level that they are now. Let's put it that way. So obviously the idea is the bishop's now challenging white's bishop on c4. Now, for many a year, humans decided the wise best move is possibly to drop the bishop back to b3 and eschew the trade on e6. But ever since engines have appeared, they've said, no, that's no good. We've probably got to take that bishop where it stands on e6. And that is exactly what occurred in this particular game. The bishop took on e6. Can you remember what your opponent did when you had this position?
Yeah, they pulled back the bishop to b3.
Good. So they basically just played
old school.
Route. I think we not had a game with that?
Perhaps we have, yeah.
Perhaps we have. So bishop b3 is possible. Then what tends to happen is the queen comes over to
That's
a5.
what I did.
And black will play rook c8, b5, b4. So one line, for example, sees this where the black basically comes here. We get a swap off, and then the queen comes out the way for black to play a5.
Now, if you show it like this looks very good for black. I don't know why I messed up somehow. I think I was scared of the knight on d5 already or something.
Okay, the knight on d. Yeah, so I think the idea is you're going to have to take that knight when it gets there.
It's probably a good idea, yes,
because it's a bit tricky, and you want to mix things up. You don't want. Sometimes you can take with the knight and then move your bishop. But you know what? When I'm playing the dragon, I tend to prefer this because I consider it a mixer, mixing things up a bit. Sure, white's got the two bishops, but the bishop on 3 isn't really great.
Yeah.
And I like to keep the knight for potential maneuvering around to c5 or e5 or whatever. And often if you get the dark squares bishop swapped off, then you're going to have a good knight against a bad bishop situation. So white, inevitably, white has to make a decision between going with the things on the H file or trying to utilize pressure on the E file against the E7 pawn. Those are generally the ways to go. So that is a different system. The likes of Nakamura have had plenty of games with that. And as I mentioned before, when the super engines had to battle against each other, they both, and I love the way that when they play, they in these competitions, they get paired with white and black. So they have to play the same position with white and black. And they decided, no, taking on E6 is the way forward. And I've annotated a few games, but now let us return.
Okay.
Short but sweet game we're going to do here. So bishop takes e6, f takes e6. So of course this position's been seen on a number of occasions, and white castles queenside, as you would expect. Of course there's always chance to bail out and castle on the king side, but I just don't think white gets anything there. And black straight away, queen a5 seems very nice, bringing the queen. So let's just talk briefly about the pros and cons of this situation here. So obviously, in transferring this pawn here, the pawn is potentially a target for white to attack. If he can find any ways to attack it, it's obviously going to be a target. On the other hand, the pawn here does control d5, so it keeps the white knight out of that square. And there's potential for use of a half-open f-file. So I'd say the other one negative is this pawn here's got slightly flimsier cover now. So if white can do h4, h5, and break through, that could be a little bit of a weakness there on g6. So maybe 2 pros and 2 cons of that move. White now essentially has to decide which way they're going to go in terms of plans. They either, as pretty much inferred, they either have to look towards trying to break through on the king side, or possibly centralize with a view to try to exploit these pawns in the middle of the board. Question time.
Yes, please. I have a question, Mr. Ward. I have a question.
The beauty is you don't actually have to put your hand up because you're the only one in the class.
Oh, yeah, you're right. Now that you mention it. So,
unless your cat is hanging around there somewhere.
It doesn't use the pause that often. So what if the king goes to b1?
Well, as luck have it, that was the move played. Did I not tell you that was going to happen? You know, this is it. So the king went to b1 for a couple of reasons.
Yes.
It frees the knight to move somewhere because this pawn is now defended. Still, it's not going to change the fact sometimes when you go here, it's worthwhile noting, particularly when the pawn's on f7, there might be a tactic knight d5 on the grounds.
Oh, it's not working anymore because the king goes to f7?
Yes, you've got it. I didn't even need to say it, but I'm sure the listeners have grabbed that. The idea is after knight takes e7, king f7 will put paid to that little idea. So nice idea. And as we know, king b1 is a very common move for white to play that, partly because it tidies things up on a2, and also it brings knight d5. What you'll remember is if, for example, I just look at this, I'm loving this. I wasn't expecting to do this, but when I return back to here, queen a5, my old queen a5 system, what you will notice is it's the F rook that I would use to play here, because the idea is then in the king b1 lines, this move isn't such a big threat again anymore, because after queen takes, in this position here, for example, this isn't such a big threat now, because after knight takes e7 check, there will be king f8 attacking the knight. So that's why the F rook goes to c8 rather than the A rook.
So good. Yeah.
There's also the chance the A rook could be used to go to b8 to support a b5, blah, blah, blah. But that is the main reason why I used to do that. So returning, and then you'll be very happy. King b1 was the move played here, but it doesn't actually carry with it the idea of knight d5. It probably carries with it the slightly more boring concept of going knight e2, maybe to swap queens. Rook c8 occurred here. So now this is where I would say there's probably 3 main ideas for white. Queen a5 was just an active move, connecting the rooks along the back rank, did attack that, did control the e5 square a little bit. So here I would say there's possibly 3 main moves. There's rook h e1, to kind of maybe look to break through with pawn to e5 in the middle. There's pawn to h4 to go on with a kingside attack, or maybe there's the move knight e2. But I would say, let's talk about knight e2 briefly. I just don't believe, say we played. So what is clear is if white could go e5 and take with the bishop, undeniably these pawns would be weak. We can't argue with that. That's not really what we're looking for. But we could have some sort of knight d7. We could have some swap of bishops and the protecting of this pawn on. And there's just one little weakness that we can easily, comfortably protect. So knight e2 is a possible move in general, but not a very exciting one. The other idea is if white plays rook he1, again, we can go knight d7. So we're controlling a little bit this square here. Actually, when the supercomputers did battle, they've had games where, well, we're going to see, okay, knight e2. I mean, again, this is absolutely nothing here for white at all. There's no knight coming to d4 even or f4. And black's absolutely fine. Yeah, so probably an equal-ish sort of endgame, I would say.
Yes, it's once again, there's once again this thing, of course, which I have to keep in mind a bit more often, because I also like the positional game, and even the end games, I like them more than a couple of years ago. And if you can get a position which is okay or good in the end game, just go for it. And yeah, I know it's exciting, the dragon, but sometimes you just have to also commit to, hey, this will win probably.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, everyone loves these little dragon games where you sack, checkmate. But winning the game is what you need to do, and also you have to be prepared to get these middle stroke end game positions which are equalish chances, and you just have to try and outplay your opponent. You know, whoever wins, congratulations. But here I would say there's a little bit of an imbalance because potentially there's the chance for a kind of minority attack even to go here to try and weaken this situation, and of course there's standard offensive on the queen side as well, utilization of the c4 square, so definitely chances for progress here. Yeah, so back to this position, and what are we going to see? Well, in this particular game, so another little idea, if I just rolled back here for a second and played rook e1 instead of going knight, we would still have this move knight d7. Seems like a standard approach. The idea is that you're then getting the control here of the e5 square. But actually, one key move is that white can play this move e5 themselves.
Oh, it is possible.
It is possible because obviously we can't take it with the pawn pinned to the knight. We can't take it with the queen. But there are two choices here. And again, there was a game I annotated this month, funnily enough. So you can take it with the knight, and then white can take here, and black goes queen f5. The engines have had a battle in this position. Actually, it just ended in a draw. But you could argue that white has got a minuscule advantage for white here because a little bit of pressure against there as compared. Probably white has to actually, because of this, they probably have to go rook e4 in this position. Maybe, I don't think it's very much actually. It's probably about equal chances this, or what black can do is after e5, if I bring it here, you can of course just play d5, which leaves you still with the ability to maneuver a knight to c4, and then it's just a question of, you know, what goes on here. So yeah, so two choices in that instance, essentially, I would say, for black. But in this game, no hanging around, h4. That's what people are paying their money for, or maybe not paying any money for at this point. So h4, so they're basically he's looking to get a break down the h file. So black responded here with knight h5. Loving that move. Why do I love that move? Full control over here. Yes, offering a swap of dark square bishops, which will leave that a little bit weaker here, and basically halting that pawn where it stands. Thanks very much. You're not getting any further, that Mr. H pawn. That H file won't be opened up any too soon. Well, White says, are you sure about that? G4, what do you reckon? Where are you going? Well, I actually afforded this move with a question mark. Because in retrospect, it doesn't work out very well for white. I'm not going to moan too much about white's moves. There's other moves. He could play queen d4, check e5. Yeah, I suppose there's still the chance to go e5 in this position. Takes, but queen f4. And then we could get a trade, something. Still, I don't think a big problem for black. Actually, I think there was something let me see if there's one or two things which actually still stand up for black, because if white tries to win this pawn, he'll actually notice, oops, there's a bit of a problem there. I can't do that. And if he tries to take on e7, sorry, I know which rush through those moves, then of course there's a good old fork. So there's not as much pressure down the e file as one might think. So white decided, I'm going to try and budge that knight. And I suspect, let's talk about the problem with that. The problem with that, of course, he leaves this pawn here quite weak. He is attacking the knight on h5. He probably, I would imagine, expected this knight just to come in here, and he was going to continue with his h pawn thrust, try and somehow get to the h file. Still, I think black would probably keep that h file closed. Probably white would be advised to throw a check in here before black could go h6, and then the king has to move somewhere. I suspect that's what white was expecting, but I'm afraid he was in for a rude awakening, because instead the knight moved into g3, attacking the rook on h1. But you think, wait, how is that knight going to get out of that square? How is he going to get out of it?
It doesn't need to.
It doesn't. It doesn't need. It might not need to. So let's see why it doesn't. Well, white played rook h3, now moving the attacked rook to attack the knight. And how do we protect that knight? Well, very comfortably with rook takes f3. And white played queen g2 and said,
"Oh,
what are you doing there? Your knight's attacked, your rook's attacked. What are we gonna? How are we gonna be able to protect any of those?" And of course, a very familiar move hits the board now, and I'm sure I don't even. You can feel free at home to stop and have a look at it. But you know what? I'm confident now. Any of our regulars would play this move instantaneously here.
It depends, because the question is with which rook.
Well,
it must be.
I think. Well, it's not.
It must be the c1.
It is the c1, because the whole idea is after they take back, we can now take with the queen, and then we're laterally defending that knight enough times, which is super duper duper. So we have sacrificed the exchange, but we've satisfied all the criteria for sacrificing the exchange on c3. Namely, we've bagged a pawn anyway, and the e4 pawn is a lot weaker as a result of it. So we're not, at the moment, there may or may not be pinny things going on, but we're certainly adequately defending that. And it's completely clear that the white king is bereft of any cover over there on the queen's side.
Wait. I'm thinking about what happens when white plays rook d3, though.
Well, as luck might have it, I thought, this is beautiful about these things here. White actually played the move rook g1 in this position to seriously gang up on that knight here. But I thought to myself, do you know what? I reckon Arne will ask me about the move rook d3. I think he's gonna say, what should you do about rook d3? Because surely we could go rook takes rook and then queen takes pawn check, and that's probably good. But I came up with this lovely line, which hopefully you're gonna sit back and watch this. Okay, get your popcorn ready for this little outcome here. Perfect. So this is what I came up with: queen e1 check, king b2, queen b4 check. So now, of course, bearing in mind the king goes back to c1, there's a rook f1 check, which could be, but so now they block it with the rook, which is no doubt your intention.
That's how
queen
far
d4
I calculated.
Check,
yeah.
And still white can't now block this with a rook f2 check. So he has to go walkabouts over it. And now we go here check, and the king goes, no, I'm not going any further. I'm going back there. But now rook f2. And now he says, well, okay, attacking my queen. Do your worst if you can. Well, I'm doing my worst here. You can't go back to a1. Queen takes a2, mate. Better continue the journey. Check here, sorry. You're going to have to come a little bit further down the board. How much further? Here, check. Uh-oh, I can block that. But unfortunately,
you cannot block that.
You cannot block that.
Block that.
Take that, mister. So rook d3, attempting to get rid of our remaining rook, doesn't even do that.
Wow.
So white instead says, come on then, do your worst. Rook G1. What are you going to do about that? And black said, well, you know what? I could do a few different things.
I see something nice.
So black queen, I love it.
That wasn't it.
So he played queen. Funny enough, he played queen before. He was a bit mean, actually, back. I think he was unnecessarily mean, to be honest, because he played queen b4 check. His opponent played king e1. And he went queen c3 check, just to show who's boss, basically.
Very good.
But I think he could equally have just played queen to d4 check here. This would have been super smooth. Look at the way the queen kind of oscillates. It rocks back now to this square here. The whole purpose being that you cover the f2 square. And after queen takes g3, rook takes, white is actually up by a whole rook. But how can he defend the mate on b2 whilst keeping that rook protected and stopping queen d4? So there's no rook b1 because of queen d4. There's no queen b3 because of queen takes rook. And in fact, there is nothing good for white. There's no way to defend that.
Yeah, there's always the chance to play with 2 rooks against the queen, but the pawn dominance of black is just like, it's giving up.
Yeah, it's funny. Yeah, it's funny you should say that. Well, I feel I've done a good job today.
I think we're doing.
I anticipated all of your questions, which and the whole concept of the queen against the 2 rook situation. Let me show you something. So here we are back in this stage here. So there's no chance for a queen against 2 rook at the moment because you have to do this thing called get out of checks. So that's part of the game. King to b1, and now what happened is black played another cute move. Knight takes e4. So he didn't do the rocking back with the queen, and instead he played knight takes e4. Wow. What are you going to do about that move? Well, it's not really a great situation for white to be in, but let's just talk about a couple of things. So first things first, well, what are we going to do about that? There seems to be a slight issue. If you take that rook with the queen, then there's a little check on d2, which is going to be kind of annoying, really. So rook takes f3 is pretty much forced. I think we're all in agreement. Knight d2 check. Now, you could say to me, could you not? This is the moment when white has to bail out, give up the queen for the knight, leaving 2 rooks for the queen. Well, my point is this. If he does queen takes d2 now, queen takes d2, we've already got a count of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Set 3 pawns already. And probably the only chance would be rook here with the chance of getting some sort of action here. But after queen here, check, king here, queen, there's even more pawns in the bag. So that's a pretty hopeless situation. On the other hand, after king c1, what is particularly mean is knight takes f3, attacks not only the rook here, but a little checkmate threat on a1.
That is so nasty.
So I'm afraid to say, from white's point of view, knight takes e4, it was in fact game over.
Wow.
Short, but couldn't be sweeter than that, could it? Now, let's talk 9 bishop c4. What are you going to do? The fact is, you know what you can do.
Yes.
You've got it. You must have lost it somewhere. It's hidden under your desk. But there's a whole range of DVDs where I talk quite a lot about 9 bishop c4. And you can pick any of those above systems to play, including this knight takes d4 and bishop e6 one. Yeah,
the plug is there.
Or you could go Topolov, or you could go Chinese, or you could go Soltis, or you could go my old Queen A5 line, or Knight D7. It's just a matter of picking one that you like. And bearing in mind that if white is going to play 9 bishop c4, boy, do they have to be prepared, because they could face any one of those lines.
I love it. Chris, you're a lifesaver. I will play a couple of more blitz games, and there will be enough players who will give the bishop c4, and then I will show you my success with all the different variations.
To that very first successful outing from you. And we may or may not feature it
in one of the 2026 The
Brilliant.
yearly dragon. Okay.
A decade of successful
Exactly. Bishop c4, nothing else. 100 variations on how to defeat this system. This was the Monster Dragon. Thank you so much, Chris. It was a pleasure as always. And thank you for watching. We see each other soon enough.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.